My son-in-law called me and said, "We are 20 minutes away with 15 friends, so get the guest rooms ready and start cooking, old man." He thought he was barging into a helpless retiree's home to party for a month on my dime. He thought he could treat my oceanfront sanctuary like a cheap motel. But he forgot that before I retired to fish in the Florida Keys, I spent 40 years hunting down financial fraud for the most ruthless corporations in America. I didn't get mad. I just hung up the phone, unlocked the front door, and initiated a legal protocol that would turn his vacation into a bankruptcy hearing. My name is Douglas Blackwood. I am 68 years old. If you saw me walking down the dock in Key Largo, you would see a man wearing a faded fishing shirt and driving a truck that has more rust than paint. You would think I live check to check on Social Security. That is exactly what I want you to think. It is certainly what my son-in-law Brad thinks. He sees a senile old man who got lucky and bought a nice house. He does not see the $40 million sitting in diversified trust funds that I manage with the precision of a surgeon. I was sitting on the terrace of the Azure Horizon, my new villa, watching the sun dip below the water. The ice in my glass of cheap whiskey clinked softly. It was the first week of peace I had known in years. Then my phone vibrated against the teak table. The screen flashed the name Brad. My stomach tightened. Not out of fear, but out of the sheer exhaustion of dealing with a parasite. I answered without a word. The voice on the other end was loud, accompanied by the rushing wind of a car window down and the thumping bass of electronic music. Barging in, Brad shouted, "Hey, old man, we are on our way to you. There will be 15 of us. Prepare beds, towels, slippers, and food. We will be staying for 4 weeks. We will be there in 25 minutes, so hurry up and get moving." He did not ask. He did not say hello. He issued orders like he was the CEO and I was the janitor. I took a slow sip of my drink. 15 people, I repeated calmly. "Yeah," Brad laughed. "My boys from the firm. We are celebrating the launch of my new fund. Sarah told us you bought a place on the water. Why did you hide it?" "Douglas, trying to keep the good life from family." "That is selfish. Anyway, open the gate. We need ice for the cooler." Sarah, my daughter, my sweet spineless daughter, who could never say no to this man. I had bought this villa through a shell company specifically to keep it off public records, but I had made the mistake of telling Sarah the address in confidence last week. She had leaked it. I looked at the calm ocean. I looked at the birds diving for fish. I realized my peace was already gone. I could scream. I could tell him to turn around. But Brad was the type of man who thrived on conflict. If I said no, he would show up anyway, bang on the gate, and make a scene. He would drag Sarah into it. He would weaponize my grandchildren, even though they were not with him this time. "Understood," I said. "The gate code is 4499. "Good boy," Brad said. "Have the AC cranked down. We are sweating out here." The line went dead. I set the phone down. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not have a plan. I had 25 minutes. I stood up and walked into the living room. It was furnished with Italian leather sofas and original artwork pieces I had collected over decades. Brad would destroy this in an hour. He would spill wine burn holes with cigars and treat my property with the same disdain he treated my daughter. I pulled my phone out again and dialed a number that was programmed on speed dial. Leonard Katz answered on the first ring. Leonard was not just a lawyer. He was a shark who ate other sharks for breakfast. Douglas Leonard said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Brad is 20 minutes out," I said. "He has 15 people. He is forcing a stay. Activate Ghost Protocol." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then I heard the sound of a keyboard clacking furiously. "You want the full package?" Leonard asked. "Commercial liability trespass conversion and the damages clause." Everything I said. He thinks he is crashing at his father-in-law's house. I want to change the legal reality of the ground he stands on. Done, Leonard said. I am emailing you the waiver now. Print it. Make him sign it before you hand over a single key. And Douglas, yes. Get the good scotch out of the house. I hung up and moved with a speed that defied my age. I went to the wine cellar. I pulled out the crates of vintage Bordeaux and the Macallan 25, and I carried them to the hidden storage room behind the pantry and locked the reinforced steel door. In their place, I put 3 cases of $2 wine I kept for cooking and a bottle of generic vodka I used for cleaning wounds. I went upstairs to the master suite. I took my laptop, my personal documents, and my watch collection. I put them in my waterproof duffel bag. I locked the master suite door and engaged the digital deadlock. That room was now a vault. I ran back downstairs to the printer. The document Leonard sent was already waiting. It was titled Guest Liability and Indemnity Agreement. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard form you sign when renting a jet ski or staying at an Airbnb. It looked boring. It looked harmless. But the devil is in the details, or in this case, in the fine print on page 2. I placed the single sheet of paper on the entry table next to a cheap ballpoint pen. I heard the roar of engines before I saw them. Gravel crunched violently in the driveway. I looked out the window. 4 black SUVs rented judging by the barcode stickers on the windows swerved into my courtyard. They parked diagonally, taking up all the space, blocking my exit. The doors opened and the noise hit me. 15 people spilled out. Men in designer sunglasses and unbuttoned shirts, women in bikinis and sheer cover-ups. They were loud, entitled, and already drunk. Brad stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was 32 years old, a third-rate stockbroker who spent money he did not have to impress people who did not like him. He wore a gold chain that was too thick and a watch that was too big. He saw me standing on the porch. "Hey," he shouted, clapping his hands. "Douglas. Don't just stand there. Come help with the bags. These coolers are heavy." I walked down the steps. I did not help with the bags. I looked at the group. They stared at me like I was the hired help. "Where is Sarah?" I asked. "She is in the back car," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. "She is feeling sick. Probably motion sickness. She is weak like that." "Grab that case, will you?" I walked past him to the last car. Sarah was sitting in the passenger seat, looking pale and terrified. When she saw me, her eyes welled up with tears. "Dad," she whispered, "I am so sorry. I tried to stop him. He said it was a networking event. He said you invited us." I reached in and squeezed her hand. "It is okay, Sarah. Get out. Go inside." She nodded, wiping her face. I walked back to the front door. The group was already trying to push past me. "Hold on," I said. My voice was not loud, but it had the timbre of a man who used to interrogate embezzlers for a living. They stopped. Brad rolled his eyes. "What is it now, Douglas?" "We need to pee. We need drinks. Get out of the way." "House rules," I said, pointing to the paper on the table. "Everyone signs in. Insurance requirement. I can't have you slipping by the pool and suing me." Brad laughed, a barking laugh that made his friends chuckle. "Insurance, you are paranoid, old man. Give me the pen." He grabbed the pen and scribbled his signature without reading a single word. He didn't even look at the header. He just wanted to get inside and start marking his territory. "There," he said, tossing the pen down. "Happy now, give me the Wi-Fi password and fetch us some towels." I picked up the document. I checked the signature. It was valid. That was the moment the trap snapped shut. "The keys are in the door," I said. I picked up my old duffel bag and my fishing rod case from the corner. Brad paused, a bottle of my cheap vodka already in his hand. "Wait," he said. "Where are you going?" I am going fishing, I said. For how long? Brad asked, confused. Who is going to make dinner? Who is going to clean up? And I walked past him, stepping over a designer suitcase he had left in the middle of the hallway. I am the owner, Brad, I said without looking back. I am not the butler. But we are staying for a month, he shouted after me. You can't just leave. Watch me, I said. I walked out to my rusted truck. I had to maneuver it carefully over the grass to get around their blockade of SUVs. As I drove down the long driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Brad standing in the doorway, confused, holding a bottle of cheap vodka surrounded by 15 people who expected to be waited on hand and foot. He looked like a king who had just conquered a castle, not realizing the castle was rigged to explode. I did not go fishing. I drove 5 miles down the coast to the Islander resort. I checked into a suite that Leonard had booked for me under the company name. I set up my laptop on the desk and connected to the secure server. The Azure Horizon was equipped with a state-of-the-art smart home system. I had cameras in the living room, the kitchen, the pool area, and the hallways. Not in the bedrooms or bathrooms, of course, I am not a creep, but everywhere else was my domain. I opened the video feed. The screen flickered to life. They were already destroying the place. One of Brad's friends, a tall man with a ponytail, was standing on my coffee table shaking a bottle of champagne. The cork flew off and hit the ceiling. Foam sprayed all over the Italian leather. Another girl was in the kitchen opening cabinets and sweeping the contents onto the floor because she couldn't find a corkscrew. Brad was standing in the center of the room shouting. Don't worry about it, he yelled. My father-in-law is a pushover. He won't do anything. This place is basically mine anyway. He is putting it in my name next year for tax purposes. I took a sip of the room service coffee. Put it in his name. That was rich. I picked up the signed document Brad had left on the table. I scanned it into the system and sent it to Leonard. Document secured, I typed. Execute Phase 2. Leonard replied instantly. Conversion confirmed. The property status is now legally changed from private residence to commercial venue. The clock starts now. What Brad did not know, or what he had failed to read in his arrogance, was that the paper he signed was not a standard liability waiver. It was a short-term commercial lease agreement. By signing it, he had agreed to rent the villa as a commercial event space. The rate listed in the fine print was $15,000 a night. There was a penalty clause of $5,000 per person for any unlisted guests. He had listed 0 guests. There was a cleaning fee of $10,000. And most importantly, there was a clause that gave the landlord me the right to evict without notice if the terms of the lease were violated, with the full cost of the reservation due immediately. I watched on the screen as someone dropped a lit cigarette onto my Persian rug. A small black burn mark appeared on the intricate red pattern. I zoomed in on the image and took a screenshot. That rug cost $12,000. I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop. I typed Item 1, Persian rug. Damage total. Replacement cost $12,000. I watched as they raided the pantry. They found the cheap wine and spat it out on the floor, laughing. This tastes like vinegar, Brad shouted. Check the cellar. The old man must have a stash, I watched as they tried to open the reinforced steel door of the storage room. They kicked it. They threw a chair at it. The chair broke. The door did not scratch. Item 2, dining chair. Damage broken leg. Cost $800. I sat back and watched. Most fathers would be heartbroken to see their family treat them this way. They would be sad to see their property destroyed. But I was not sad. I was calculating. Every stain, every scratch, every insult was a line item. For years, I had bailed Brad out. I had paid off his credit cards when he cried to Sarah. I had co-signed his car loan. I had kept silent when he mocked my old truck and my simple clothes. I did it for Sarah. I did it because I thought that if I showed him kindness, he might eventually learn to be a man. I was wrong. Some men do not learn from kindness. They only learn from consequences. And Brad was about to get a masterclass. The sun went down completely. The party in my villa ramped up. The music was so loud, the microphones on my cameras were peaking in the red. I saw Sarah sitting in the corner of the living room curled up in a ball looking miserable. She was not drinking. She was not partying. She looked like a hostage. My heart ached for her. She was the collateral damage in this war. I picked up my phone and sent her a text message. If you want to leave, walk to the end of the driveway. I will have a car waiting. I watched on the screen as she checked her phone. She looked around the room. She looked at Brad, who was currently trying to perform a keg stand on my kitchen island. She stood up. She started to walk toward the door. Brad saw her. He jumped down and grabbed her arm. "Where do you think you are going?" he demanded. His face was flushed and sweaty. "I feel sick," Sarah said. "I am going to get some air." "You are staying right here," Brad hissed. "You are the hostess. You need to serve the drinks. Don't embarrass me in front of the investors." He shoved her back toward the sofa. I froze. The calculator in my head stopped. The cold forensic accountant vanished. In his place was a father who had just watched a man put his hands on his daughter. I closed the laptop. I did not need to see anymore. The financial ruin was already in motion. But now it wasn't just about money. I picked up the phone and called Leonard again. "Change of plans," I said. "What is it?" Leonard asked. "We are not waiting for the month to end," I said. "We are accelerating the timeline." "I want the power cut," Douglas Leonard warned. "If you cut the power, they might damage the property further in the dark." "I don't care about the property," I said. "I want the power cut. I want the water off. And I want you to call the code enforcement officer." "You want to SWAT your own house?" Leonard asked. "No," I said. "I want to save my daughter, and then I want to burn his world to the ground." "Do it." I hung up. I walked to the window of my hotel room and looked out toward the coast. In the distance, I could almost see the lights of my villa. "Enjoy the party, Brad," I whispered, "because the lights are about to go out." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Brad. "Hey," he screamed. "The power just died. The music is off. The AC is off. It is 90 degrees in here. Fix it, old man." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "Hello, Brad," I said. "I am afraid that is a feature, not a bug." "What are you talking about?" he yelled. "I am talking about the commercial lease you signed," I said. "It has a strict energy consumption limit. You exceeded it." "What lease? I didn't sign a lease. You signed a document at the door," I said. "And according to my system to restore power, you need to pay the surcharge." "How much?" he demanded. $5,000, I said. "You are crazy," he screamed. "I am not paying you $5,000. "Then I suggest you open a window," I said. "It is going to be a hot night." I hung up. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to turn up the heat. I drove 5 miles south to the Islander Resort, a place where they know my name not because I am loud, but because I tip in cash and never cause a scene. The valet took my rusted truck without blinking. He knows that truck is worth less than the tires on the Bentleys parked next to it, but he also knows I own the company that insures the hotel. I checked into a suite on the top floor, a room with marble floors and silence so deep it felt heavy. This was my command center. I did not come here to sleep. I came here to hunt. I placed my laptop on the mahogany desk and cracked a bottle of sparkling water. My hands were steady. They always are when the trap is set. I logged into the secure server that controlled the Azure horizon. The screen flickered to life, splitting into a grid of 6 high-definition feeds. The living room, the kitchen, the pool deck, the hallway, the driveway. I had eyes everywhere except the bathrooms and bedrooms, because I am a ruthless man, not a pervert. Before I looked at the chaos unfolding in my home, I pulled up the document Brad had scribbled his signature on just 30 minutes ago. He thought it was a liability waiver, a piece of paper to protect an old man from a slip-and-fall lawsuit. He was wrong. I zoomed in on the PDF, the digital signature stamped clearly at the bottom, with a time and GPS location tag. It was ironclad. Let me tell you exactly what my son-in-law signed. It is called a commercial event lease agreement, disguised under a dense layer of liability jargon. Clause 4, Section B. By entering the premises with more than 4 guests, the signatory agrees that the property usage is classified as a commercial event. The rental rate shifts from $0 to $15,000 per night. It is the standard market rate for oceanfront wedding venues in the Keys during peak season. I did not make that number up. It is defensible in court. I scrolled down to Clause 7. Unregistered guest penalty. $5,000 per head for every person not listed on the initial manifest. Brad had listed 0 guests. He brought 15. That is $75,000 in penalties the moment they crossed the threshold. And then there was the kicker, Clause 9, the damages and restoration provision. The signatory accepts full financial responsibility for all damages, repairs, and cleaning fees to be assessed by a certified appraiser of the landlord's choosing. It also waived his right to tenancy laws. This wasn't a residential lease. It was a business transaction. And business transactions do not have eviction moratoriums. I minimized the document and maximized the camera feed from the kitchen. The audio was crisp. I could hear the ice clinking in glasses and the thumping bass of the music they had blasted through my sound system. Brad was standing by the kitchen island. He was holding one of the bottles of wine I had left in the pantry. It was a bottle with a fancy French label that I had printed off the internet 2 days ago and glued onto a $3 bottle of vinegar-heavy table wine mixed with a little rubbing alcohol to give it a kick. I call it the Decoy Reserve. He held it up to the light, preening for his friends. "Look at this," he shouted, his voice slurring slightly. The old man tried to hide the good stuff. "This is a 1998 Bordeaux, probably worth $2,000. His friends cheered. They were a pack of hyenas in linen shirts. Brad grabbed a corkscrew and jammed it into the neck of the bottle, shredding the cork because he has the finesse of a sledgehammer. He poured the dark red liquid into my crystal glasses, filling them to the brim like it was soda. He took a large gulp. I watched his face. He grimaced, his eyes watering, but his ego wouldn't let him admit it tasted like gasoline. "Smooth," he lied, coughing. "You can really taste the oak." I chuckled softly in my hotel room. "You are tasting the bottom shelf of a gas station, Brad." Then the mood in the kitchen shifted. One of his friends, a guy with slicked back hair and a watch that cost more than my first house, leaned against the counter. "So Brad," the guy asked, "your father-in-law, he just left. That is kind of weird, isn't it?" "It is his house." Brad laughed, a loud, ugly sound that echoed through the speakers of my laptop. "It is not his house," Brad said, waving the glass around and spilling red stains on my white marble countertop. "Not really. I mean, his name is on the deed for now, but that is just a formality. The old guy is losing it. You should have seen him at dinner last week. He forgot where he parked his truck." I narrowed my eyes. I had not forgotten where I parked. I had parked down the street because the valet lot was full. "He is senile." Brad continued, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "Sarah and I are already looking into assisted living facilities. We found a nice one up in Ocala. It is cheap, but he won't know the difference. Once we get power of attorney, this place is going on the market. Or maybe we keep it as a party pad. What do you think?" The group laughed. They raised their glasses to Brad, the future owner of my life's work. "To the party pad," they shouted. I sat there in the silence of my hotel suite. The anger did not feel like fire. It felt like ice. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. He was not just a leech. He was a predator. He was planning to put me away. He was planning to declare me incompetent, lock me in a budget nursing home 200 miles away, and strip mine my assets to pay for his gambling debts and his ego. He thought I was a helpless old man who fished all day because he had nothing else to do. He did not know that I fished because it was the only thing that quieted the mind of a man who spent 40 years destroying people like him in courtrooms. I looked at the screen. Brad was refilling his glass with the poison wine, looking like the king of the world. He had no idea that he was standing inside a legal bear trap that had already snapped shut. I took a sip of my sparkling water. It was crisp and cold. "You want to send me to a home, Brad?" I whispered to the screen. "I am going to send you to the poorhouse first." I reached for my phone. It was time to start cataloging the damages. Every stain, every scratch, every lie. I opened a new spreadsheet file. I named it Operation Eviction. I watched as the guy with the slicked back hair put his cigar out on my kitchen island. He ground the ash into the stone. Entry number 1, I typed. Malicious damage to stone surface, cleaning and resurfacing fee, $2,000. The night was young, and the bill was just getting started. I leaned closer to the screen. I needed to see everything. I needed to let the hate sharpen my focus. Because when I was done with him, he would not have a house to go back to. He would not have a job. He would not have a wife. He would have nothing but a very expensive lesson in why you never ever underestimate the old man by the sea. The camera feed flickered as someone walked by and knocked a vase off the hallway table. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. Brad didn't even look down. He just stepped over the shards. I added another row to the spreadsheet. This was going to be the most expensive vacation of his life. I poured myself a glass of the Macallan 25 that I had wisely engaged in evacuating from the villa before the horde arrived. It was amber smooth and tasted like civilization. On my laptop screen, however, I was watching the rapid decline of human evolution. The party at the Azure horizon had shifted from loud to destructive. It was not an accident. It was not a few clumsy guests bumping into furniture. It was a systematic dismantling of my property born from a total lack of respect for anything that did not belong to them. I watched the feed from the living room camera. The guy with the slicked back hair, the one who looked like he sold counterfeit watches out of a trunk, was sitting on my custom Italian leather sofa. This was not just a couch. It was a piece commissioned from a workshop in Milan, crafted from full-grain leather, that cost more than most people's cars. Its value was $20,000. I had waited 6 months for it to be shipped. He had a lit cigar in his hand. There were coasters everywhere. I had left them out on purpose. Stone coasters, wood coasters. But he didn't use them. He leaned back laughing at something Brad shouted from the kitchen and tapped the long gray ash directly onto the armrest. Then, as if that was not enough, he pressed the glowing ember into the leather to extinguish it. I did not flinch. I did not scream. I did not call the house to yell at him. I simply moved my cursor to the capture button and clicked. The image froze. A high-definition record of vandalism. I opened the software Leonard had set up for me. It was a beautiful program usually used by insurance adjusters to total cars after a wreck. I created a new entry. Item 3. Custom Italian sofa. Damage type malicious burn and permanent discoloration. Restoration status impossible. Replacement cost $20,000. I added a 20% administrative fee for the time it would take me to order a new one. I took a sip of my scotch. The number on the bottom of the spreadsheet updated automatically. The total was climbing. Then my eyes shifted to the feed covering the dining area. A girl in a sheer white cover-up was dancing on the table. She was holding one of the glasses of my fake wine, swinging it around like a baton. She lost her balance. It happened in slow motion. She fell backward, and the glass flew from her hand. It shattered on the floor, but the liquid, that dark, chemically enhanced red mixture I had concocted, splashed in a wide, violent arc across the Persian rug. That rug was not just floor covering. It was an antique from the 19th century, hand-knotted silk and wool, appraised at $15,000. I had bought it at an auction in London. It had survived wars. It had survived ocean crossings. It did not survive a drunk girl named Tiffany. The red stain soaked into the fibers instantly. Brad walked into the frame. He looked at the girl, then at the rug. He didn't help her up. He kicked the shard of glass under the table and poured some bottled water on the stain, rubbing it with his shoe. Any expert will tell you that scrubbing a wine stain is the worst thing you can do. It sets the dye. It destroys the pile. He was grinding the damage into the history of the fabric. Item 4. Antique Persian rug. Damage fluid saturation and abrasive friction. Value $15,000. Total loss. I typed the numbers. The rhythmic clicking of my keyboard was the only sound in my hotel suite. As I watched Brad laugh and high-five the girl who had just destroyed a piece of history, a memory surfaced. It clawed its way up from the back of my mind, cold and sharp. 5 years ago. It was a Tuesday. Brad had come to my old office, the small one I kept downtown before I fully retired. He was pale. He was sweating. He was crying. He sat in the guest chair shaking and told me he had made a mistake. A big mistake. He had leveraged his personal account on a high-risk options trade and lost everything. But it wasn't just his money. He had borrowed $50,000 from a bookie in Vegas to cover the margin call. He told me they were going to break his legs. He told me they would come to the house where he lived with Sarah. Please, Douglas, he had begged, tears streaming down his face. Don't tell Sarah. She will leave me. I will pay you back. I swear. Just help me this one time. I looked at him then, and I saw a pathetic, broken boy. I thought about Sarah. I thought about my daughter's happiness. I didn't want her husband to be crippled. I didn't want thugs knocking on her door. So I wrote the check. $50,000. I wired it directly to the account he gave me to clear the debt. I never asked for the money back. I just wanted him to learn. I wanted him to be safe. 2 weeks later at a family barbecue, I heard him telling Sarah and her cousins about his financial genius. Yeah, Brad had said, puffing out his chest, holding a beer. The market took a dip, but I doubled down. Diamond hands, baby. I made 50 grand in a single afternoon. Cleared all our debts. It is all about knowing when to hold them. Sarah had looked at him with such adoration. My hero, she had said. I stood there by the grill flipping burgers and I said nothing. I let him have the lie. I let him keep his dignity because I thought it would make him a better man. I thought gratitude would change him. I looked at the screen now. I looked at the man who was currently letting his friends destroy my home. The man who called me old man. The man who was planning to put me in a nursing home to get his hands on the rest of my money. He hadn't learned a thing. He had taken my silence for weakness. He had taken my generosity for stupidity. I looked at the spreadsheet. The total was now over $40,000 in damages and fees, and the night was not even half over. This time there would be no check. There would be no silence. There would be no saving him from the bookies or the banks or the law. He had lied to my daughter about his success. He had lied to me about his gratitude. I took another sip of scotch. It burned pleasantly in my chest. I watched as another guest, a man in wet swim trunks, sat down on the linen armchair in the reading nook. The water soaked instantly into the fabric. That chair was vintage French upholstered in raw silk. Item 5. Vintage armchair. Damage water and chlorine saturation. Value $4,000. I hit enter. The software updated the running total. The balance of power had shifted 5 years ago, but Brad was too arrogant to notice. He thought he was playing a game with a senile retiree. He didn't realize he was in a cage match with a forensic accountant who had kept the receipts. I watched Sarah on the patio camera. She was sitting alone on a lounge chair looking out at the dark ocean. She wasn't part of the destruction inside. She looked small. She looked tired. I knew that soon, very soon, I would have to break her heart to save her life. I would have to show her exactly who she had married. And that would hurt me more than any stained rug or burned sofa. But looking at Brad inside pouring another drink, laughing, as he kicked a piece of broken glass across the floor, I knew it had to be done. He had burned his bridge 5 years ago. Tonight, he was just dancing in the ashes. I zoomed in on the kitchen counter. Brad was using one of my Japanese chef knives to open a beer can, prying the tab up with the tip of the blade. The tip snapped off. Item 6. Hand-forged Damascus steel knife. Damage broken tip. Value $600. Keep going, Brad, I whispered. You are digging a hole so deep you will never climb out. I minimized the camera feed and opened my email. I drafted a message to Leonard. Subject evidence log. Attached 15 screenshots of willful destruction of property. Update the filing. We are not just suing for breach of contract. We are adding a tort claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress and vandalism. I hit send. I sat back and waited for the next disaster. The night was young, and my son-in-law was expensive. The air conditioning in my hotel suite was set to a crisp 68 degrees. It was a dry, manufactured cold that felt like luxury against my skin. 5 miles away at the azure horizon, the Florida night was heavy with humidity. It was the kind of heat that wraps around you like a wet wool blanket, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your back within seconds of stepping outside. I sat at the desk looking at the dashboard of the smart home system on my laptop. The time was exactly midnight. The party at the villa was still raging, but the energy had shifted from destructive to sloppy. On the screen, I saw bodies slumped on my ruined furniture. I saw a couple arguing by the pool. I saw Brad standing in the center of the living room, shirt unbuttoned, sweating, even though the AC was currently running full blast. He looked like a man trying to hold on to a moment that was slipping away. I hovered my mouse over the climate control tab. It was a sophisticated system zoned for efficiency, but also capable of total remote lockdown. I had programmed a macro earlier that evening. I called it the sweat box. With a single click, I initiated the sequence. On the screen, the indicators for the 3 industrial HVAC units turned from green to gray. The pool heater disengaged. The water heater for the showers shut down. I leaned back and watched. It takes about 15 minutes for a glass house in the Florida Keys to turn into a greenhouse when the air stops moving. At 12:15, I saw the first signs of distress. The girl who had spilled the wine on my rug started fanning herself with a magazine. The guy with the slicked back hair took off his linen jacket and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. At 12:20, the condensation started to form on the sliding glass doors. The air inside was becoming stagnant, recycled, and hot. At 12:30, the panic set in. Brad was marching around the room, smashing the thermostat buttons on the wall. I could see him shouting, pointing at the vents. He grabbed a chair and stood on it to put his hand against the ceiling vent, feeling for a breeze that wasn't there. He looked furious. He looked desperate. My phone rang. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of my water. I cleared my throat to ensure my voice sounded sleepy, frail, and confused. I answered. "Hello," I said, adding a slight tremor to my voice. "Fix it!" Brad screamed. His voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Fix it right now, old man." "Brad," I said slowly. "It is after midnight." "What is the matter? The AC is dead," he yelled. "The water is cold. My guests are melting in here. It is 90 degrees in this house. You sold us a lemon. Get a repairman out here now. I looked at the system dashboard. The internal temperature was actually only 82, but with the humidity and the alcohol in their systems, it probably felt like 100. I am looking at the system app on my phone, I lied. It does not show a malfunction. It shows a status code. Eco limit reached. What the hell is an eco limit? Brad demanded. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be annoying. Well, Brad, as I tried to tell you, this property is zoned for commercial use under the new environmental ordinances. The system automatically caps energy usage after a certain threshold to prevent grid overload. You have 15 people in there running lights, music, and appliances. You triggered the cap. Turn it off, Brad barked. Bypass it. I don't care about the grid. I can't just turn it off, I said. It is a hard lock. The only way to reset the system is to enter an admin override code. So enter the code, he shouted. I can't do that, Brad. The code is generated by the utility company. They charge a service fee for emergency overrides outside of business hours. It is an automated billing feature. Brad went silent for a second. I could hear his friends in the background complaining. One girl was crying that her makeup was melting off. Another guy was yelling that he couldn't take a cold shower. How much? Brad asked, his voice tight. I checked the fictional fee schedule I had created in my head. $500, I said. $500, he shrieked. To turn on an air conditioner, you are out of your mind. I am not paying that. Then you will have to wait until the cycle resets, I said calmly. When does it reset? 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, I said. There was a crash on the other end of the line. I think he threw a coaster at the wall. You are lying, he hissed. You are doing this on purpose. Brad, I said, keeping my voice level. I am in bed. I am a retired old man. Do you think I know how to hack a smart grid? I am just reading what the app says. If you want the cold air, I have to pay the utility provider. That money has to come from somewhere. I waited. This was the test. I knew Brad's financial situation better than he did. I knew he had maxed out 2 credit cards to rent the SUVs outside. I knew he had less than $2,000 in his checking account until his next commission check cleared, which wouldn't be for another week. $500 wasn't just a fee. It was a significant percentage of his liquidity. But I also knew his weakness, his ego. He was standing in a room full of people he was trying to impress, people he had told he owned this place. If he couldn't fix the AC, he looked weak. He looked like a fraud. He looked like a guest who didn't know how to work his own house. Fine, he spat. Fine. I am sending it. But you better fix this in 5 seconds, or I am tearing the thermostat off the wall. I heard the distinct ping of a Venmo notification on my iPad. $500. Received. It wasn't about the money. I have $40 million. I spend $500 on boat fuel without blinking. It was about the submission. It was about making him pay for the privilege of breathing comfortable air in the house he tried to steal. I received the transfer, I said. Hold on. I waited 10 seconds. I typed a few keys on my laptop, not because I needed to, but because I enjoyed the theater of it. I clicked the reactivate button. On the screen, the HVAC indicators turned green. There, I said. The override is active. It should cool down in a few minutes. About time, Brad grumbled. And listen, Douglas, don't think I am forgetting this. When Sarah and I take over the title, we are ripping this eco crap out of the walls. I smiled in the darkness of my hotel room. You won't be taking over the title, Brad, I thought. You won't even be taking over the electric bill. Good night, Brad, I said. Try to conserve energy. The next override tier is double the price. I hung up before he could respond. I watched on the screen as the cool air began to flow again. The guests stopped sweating. The tension in the room dropped slightly, but the mood was ruined. The party vibe was dead. They were tired, sticky, and annoyed. Brad was pacing the kitchen, checking his banking app on his phone. I could see the stress in his shoulders. He was doing the math. He was realizing that his cash reserves were bleeding out. I opened my spreadsheet again. Item 7. Emergency utility service fee. $500. Paid. But I didn't stop there. I added a new column to my spreadsheet. Emotional damages. I thought about the time 3 years ago when Sarah had called me crying because her car had been repossessed. Brad had told her he paid the bill. He hadn't. He had used the money to buy a table at a club for his clients. I had gone down to the impound lot, paid the fees, and got her car back. When I confronted Brad, he told me to mind my own business and that he was handling it. He handled nothing. He consumed. He destroyed. And he lied. I looked at him on the screen, now pouring another glass of my fake wine, trying to rally his troops. He was shouting something about how he fixed the system, taking credit for solving a problem I had created. He had no idea that the AC fee was just the appetizer. I minimized the camera window and opened the weather forecast for Key Largo. Tomorrow was going to be hot. And tomorrow, a very special guest was going to arrive at the villa. I picked up my phone and sent a text message to Leonard. Phase 2 complete. The subject is financially engaging. Prepare the actor for the morning role. Leonard replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. I closed my laptop. I walked to the bed and lay down on the crisp, cool sheets. I slept like a baby. I knew that 5 miles away, my son-in-law was sleeping, with one eye open, wondering what else in his kingdom was going to break. He didn't know that the real demolition hadn't even started yet. The house was just the stage. Tomorrow, I was going after the audience. Day 3 broke over Key Largo, with a sun that was too bright and a humidity that was too heavy. On my laptop screen, the azure horizon looked like a crime scene. Red plastic cups littered the driveway. A pool float shaped like a flamingo was deflated and draped over the balcony railing like a dead bird. The grass, which I paid a landscaping crew $2,000 a month to maintain, was crisscrossed with tire tracks from where one of Brad's friends had decided to do donuts in a rented SUV at 3 in the morning. I sat in my hotel suite drinking black coffee and watching the feed. I had not slept much, not because I was worried, but because I was busy. I had spent the night compiling a dossier. I had screenshots of drug use. I had audio of Brad discussing insider trading tips with his friends, tips that sounded highly illegal. And now I was about to add assault to the list. I picked up my phone and sent a single text to Leonard. Green light. Leonard Katz is a man who charges $600 an hour to sit in an air-conditioned office and destroy corporations. But today he was doing pro bono work for the sake of friendship, and frankly, for the entertainment value. He pulled up to the villa in a nondescript white sedan. He wasn't wearing his usual 3-piece Italian suit. He was wearing a beige, short-sleeved button-down shirt, dark slacks, and a lanyard with a laminated ID card that looked very official. He carried a clipboard. He looked like every bureaucrat who has ever ruined a fun afternoon. He looked perfect. I watched on the driveway camera as he walked up to the front door. He didn't rush. He walked with the plodding, annoying pace of a man who gets paid by the hour to find problems. He rang the doorbell. He rang it again. He knocked a sharp, authoritative rap that echoed through the audio feed. It took 3 minutes for the door to open. Brad stood there. He was wearing boxer shorts and an unbuttoned shirt. His hair was a mess. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who was halfway through a bender and starting to realize the hangover was going to be terminal. What Brad barked. He didn't even look at Leonard. He looked past him, squinting at the sun. "Good morning, sir," Leonard said. His voice was flat, nasal, ideally irritating. "I am Leonard Katz, Senior Compliance Officer for Monroe County Zoning and Code Enforcement. We have received multiple citations regarding this property. Brad blinked. He leaned against the doorframe, trying to look imposing, while half naked. Citations. What are you talking about? We are on vacation. Beat it. Sir Leonard continued, looking down at his clipboard and making a show of checking a box. I have reports of noise ordinance violations exceeding 80 decibels after 10 p.m. I have visual confirmation of commercial occupancy limits being exceeded in a residential zone. And I have a report of unauthorized commercial activity, specifically an unlicensed event venue operation. Brad laughed. It was a dry cracking sound. Commercial activity. Are you stupid? This is a private house. It belongs to my father-in-law. We are just hanging out. According to the county registry and the lease agreement filed 48 hours ago, Leonard said, tapping the paper. This property is currently designated as a short-term commercial rental. That subjects it to a different set of safety codes. I need to inspect the fire extinguishers and the emergency exits. He took a step forward. Brad stepped out, blocking him. He puffed out his chest. The alcohol from the night before was clearly still doing the thinking for him. You are not inspecting anything, Brad said. You are going to get in your little white car, and you are going to leave before I call the cops. I am a code enforcement officer, sir, Leonard said calmly. Denying me access to a commercial property during business hours is a violation of State Statute 479. It carries a fine of $2,000 per incident. Brad's face turned red. He stepped closer to Leonard. He was invading Leonard's personal space, using his height to intimidate. Leonard didn't flinch. He stood, his ground pen poised over the clipboard. I don't care about your statutes, Brad shouted. Do you know who owns this house, Douglas Blackwood? Do you know who that is? I do not, Leonard said. He is a very wealthy man, Brad spat. He has money you can't even dream of. And I am his son-in-law. Basically his son. Basically the owner. If you write me a ticket, I will have your badge. I will buy your whole department and turn it into a parking lot. I watched from my hotel room, shaking my head. Brad was doing exactly what I knew he would do. He was writing checks with my ego that his bank account couldn't cash. Sir, threats against a municipal officer are also a violation, Leonard said. He started writing on the citation pad. That was the spark. Brad snapped. He reached out and shoved Leonard. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a hard, two-handed shove to the chest. Leonard stumbled back, dropping his clipboard. The pen clattered onto the pavers. Get off my property, Brad screamed. I sat up in my chair. I hit the record button on the stream software to ensure I had a backup clip. Leonard regained his balance. He adjusted his glasses. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man who just won the lottery. He reached up and tapped the small black rectangle clipped to his shirt pocket. Sir Leonard said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the nasal whine and becoming the voice of a prosecutor. That is assault on a code enforcement officer. This interaction is being recorded on a body camera. You have just committed a third-degree felony under Florida law. Brad froze. He looked at the camera. He looked at Leonard. For a second, the fog of alcohol cleared, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. But then the arrogance came back. It always did. You are faking it, Brad sneered. That is not a camera. You are just a paper pusher. Get out of here before I really hurt you. Leonard bent down and picked up his clipboard. He tore off the pink carbon copy of the citation he had been writing. He placed it gently on the planter next to the door. You have been served, Mr. Bradley Thompson, Leonard said. The police will be in contact regarding the assault charge. Have a pleasant day. Leonard turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. He got in, started the engine, and drove away slowly. Brad stood there staring at the white sedan. He looked down at the pink slip of paper. He crumbled it up and threw it into the bushes. I will buy this whole town, he screamed at the empty driveway. You hear me? My father-in-law is loaded. I am untouchable. I leaned back in my leather chair. Untouchable. That was a funny word. I opened my evidence folder. I dragged the video file of the shove into it. I named it Assault on Public Official. Then I opened the spreadsheet. Item 8. Legal citation for noise violation. $500. Item 9. Legal citation for occupancy violation. $1,000. Item 10. Assault on a code officer. Legal defense fees and settlement costs. Estimated $25,000. I picked up my phone and called Leonard. Are you okay? I asked. I am fine, Leonard said. He pushes like a toddler. But we got him, Douglas. The camera caught everything. The threat, the shove, the admission of occupancy. It is gold. File the police report, I said. Already doing it, Leonard said. But Douglas, yes. He really thinks you are going to save him, doesn't he? He thinks your money is his shield. I looked at the screen. Brad was back inside the house recounting the story to his friends. He was pantomiming the shove, making himself look like a hero who defended the castle. His friends were laughing, clapping him on the back. Yes, I said. He thinks I am his shield. He doesn't realize I am the sword. I hung up. The trap was fully armed. The legal framework was set. The commercial lease was violated. The property was damaged. The law was broken. But I wasn't done. There was one loose end. One person who was still tethered to this sinking ship, and I needed to cut her loose before I fired the torpedoes. I looked at Sarah on the camera. She was in the kitchen cleaning up the mess Brad had made. She looked exhausted. She looked broken. It was time for the hardest part of the plan. I had to hurt my daughter to save her. I had to make her see him not as her husband, but as the liability he was. I opened my text messages. I typed a message to Sarah. We need to talk. Meet me at the marina in 1 hour. Come alone. Or don't come at all. I watched her read it. I watched her look at Brad, who was currently opening another bottle of my rubbing alcohol wine. She put her phone in her pocket. She grabbed her keys. She was coming. I closed the laptop. The financial ruin was inevitable now, but the emotional rescue was just beginning. I sat in my truck at the marina parking lot, the engine idling and the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the Florida heat. My phone rang. It was Sarah. I stared at the screen for 2 seconds before answering. I did not answer as a father ready to soothe a scraped knee. I answered as a man holding the only life raft in a hurricane. Dad, she sobbed. The sound was wet and panicked. I can't do this anymore. You have to stop him. He is out of control. I checked my watch. 2 in the afternoon. Stop him from what, Sarah? I asked. My voice was flat. I needed actionable intelligence, not tears. He is lying to everyone, she whispered. The background noise was a chaotic mix of thumping bass and splashing water. He told them he bought the villa. He told them he runs a hedge fund. Dad, there is no fund. It is a Ponzi scheme. He brought them here to solicit money. He said if he didn't land these investors, we would lose the condo. He forced me to lie to you. He said if I didn't get the keys, he would leave me. The confession hung in the humid air. It wasn't just a party. It wasn't just disrespect. It was securities fraud. Brad was using my property to launder his lies. He was soliciting capital based on assets he did not own. That made me an accessory. It made Sarah a co-conspirator. I felt a surge of rage, but I pushed it down into the cold storage where I kept my business decisions. Sarah, listen to me, I said. Dad, please, she cried. Just come back, kick them out. Save us. No, I said. The silence on the line was terrified. I am not coming back to save you, Sarah, I said. I am not coming back to pay off another debt. I am done saving you from your husband. Dad, she whimpered. You have two choices, I said. My voice was steel. Option 1. You stay in that house. You continue to host a criminal enterprise. When the police arrive, and they will arrive, you will be named in the indictment. You will lose your nursing license. You will go to prison, and I will not pay for your lawyer. I heard her gasp. She had never heard me speak like this. She thought I was the soft old man who fished on the pier. She forgot I paid for her college with money earned from destroying embezzlers. Option 2, I continued. You pack a bag. You walk out the front door right now. You do not tell him you are leaving. You walk to the intersection of Highway 1 and the access road. I am 5 minutes away. If you are there, you are my daughter. If you are not, you are his accomplice. But he will be so angry, she stammered. He will, what I interrupted. Scream, let him. He is a paper tiger, Sarah. He is a fraud, and right now he is drowning. Do you want to be the anchor tied to his leg? I don't know, she cried. I promised him. Look at him, Sarah, I said. Where is he right now? I heard a sliding door open. He is by the pool, she said, her voice trembling. Look at him, I commanded. Is he worried about you? Is he worried about the condo? Or is he performing? There was a long silence. I waited. I knew what she would see because I had seen it on my camera feed 10 minutes ago. He is... She stopped. Brad was in the pool. He was holding a bottle of champagne that one of his friends had brought. He was laughing, head thrown back, and hanging onto his shoulder was the girl in the white cover-up, the one who had ruined my rug. He was whispering in her ear. She was giggling and splashing water on his chest. He wasn't acting like a man trying to save his family. He was acting like a bachelor. He is kissing her neck, Sarah whispered. The devastation in her voice was total. I didn't say anything. I didn't comfort her. I let the image burn into her mind. You have 5 minutes, Sarah, I said. The car is moving. I hung up. I put the truck in gear and pulled out. I drove slowly. If she wasn't there, she wasn't there. I couldn't drag her out. The drive took 4 minutes. I pulled onto the shoulder at the intersection. The road was empty. I gripped the steering wheel. I had miscalculated. She was too weak. I looked at the clock. 1 minute left. Then I saw movement in the rearview mirror. A figure was walking down the dusty driveway. She was dragging a suitcase that was too heavy for the gravel. She was stumbling, sweating, her hair a mess. She wasn't wearing her hostess dress. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She wasn't looking back. It was Sarah. I didn't get out to help. I let her drag the bag the last 100 yards. She needed to feel the weight of her departure. She reached the truck. She threw the bag into the bed. She climbed into the passenger seat. The blast of AC hit her face. She didn't speak. She just buckled her seatbelt and stared out the windshield. I pulled back onto the highway. He is going to be so mad, she whispered. Let him be mad, I said. He thinks I went to buy ice, she said. He gave me his credit card. It was declined. He yelled at me in front of everyone. I handed her a handkerchief. Wipe your face, I said. You are not a servant. She wiped her eyes. She took a deep breath. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said. We take the gloves off. I reached for my phone. I opened the security app. What are you doing? She asked. I am removing the VIP access, I said. I tapped the screen. I deleted Sarah's user profile. Up until this moment, Brad had a safety net. He had Sarah. As long as she was in the house, he had a claim to being family. He had a shield against the full force of the law because no father would evict his daughter with a SWAT team. By leaving, she had stripped him of his armor. He was no longer a son-in-law. He was a trespasser. He was a squatter. He was a man who had signed a commercial contract he couldn't pay in a house he didn't own with a wife who just left him. He is alone now, I said. She nodded slowly. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. Good, she said. I smiled. It was a cold smile. I drove her to the hotel. I told her to turn off her phone. I went back to my suite and opened my laptop. Brad was on the screen. He was still in the pool. He was looking at his phone, annoyed. He tried to call her, straight to voicemail. He looked around the empty driveway. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. He didn't know yet. He didn't know his wife was gone. He didn't know his credit cards were dead. He didn't know that the only thing standing between him and total annihilation had just driven away. I opened my email. I drafted a message to Leonard. Subject, status update. Body. The asset is secure. The hostage has been extracted. The shield is down. Prepare the invoice. I hit send. Day 5. The morning sun over the Islander resort was gentle, unlike the harsh exposing light hitting my villa 5 miles away. I sat on the balcony of my suite, the ocean breeze ruffling the pages of the Wall Street Journal. I wasn't really reading. Across the small table from me sat Sarah. She was wearing a plush hotel robe, her hair wrapped in a towel, eating a bowl of pistachio gelato for breakfast. It was the first time in 10 years I had seen her eat something just because she wanted to, without counting calories or worrying about what Brad would say about her figure. She looked tired, but she also looked safe. I took a sip of my coffee and opened my laptop. It was time. For 4 days, I had let Brad live in his delusion. I had let him believe he was the king of the castle even as the walls were closing in. I had let him ignore the citations. I had let him bypass the electric locks. I had let him dig his hole until he hit bedrock. Now I was going to pour the concrete. I opened my accounting software. It was the same program I used to audit Fortune 500 companies suspected of embezzlement. It was cold, precise, and unforgiving. I created a new client profile, Bradley Thompson. I drafted a new invoice, invoice number 001. I started typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard with the muscle memory of a man who has ruined 1,000 careers with a spreadsheet. So, line item 1, commercial venue rental. 4 nights at the peak seasonal market rate of $15,000 per night. Subtotal $60,000. This was not an arbitrary number. I had 3 quotes from comparable oceanfront venues in Key Largo to back it up in court. Line item 2, unregistered guest penalty, clause 7 of the signed lease agreement. 15 guests at $5,000 per head. Subtotal $75,000. He had signed it. He had not read it. That was a $50,000 mistake per page. Line item 3, biohazard and deep cleaning fee, based on the vomit I had seen on the patio and the wine stains on the rugs. $10,000. Line item 4, provisional damages assessment. This was a lowball estimate for the furniture, the broken art, and the ruined landscaping. $40,000. I looked at the grand total at the bottom of the screen. $185,000 due upon receipt. I saved the document as a PDF. I drafted a short, polite email. Subject, provisional invoice for services rendered at the Azure Horizon. Body, dear Mr. Thompson, please find attached the itemized bill for your commercial use of the property. Payment is due immediately. Failure to remit payment within 24 hours will result in a lien being placed against your personal assets and the initiation of collections proceedings. Regards, Douglas Blackwood, landlord. I hit send. I watched the screen. Delivered. I looked over at Sarah. She was scraping the bottom of the gelato bowl. She looked peaceful. She had turned off her phone 3 days ago. She didn't know about the chaos. She didn't know about the assault on Leonard. She just knew she was free. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Brad. I picked it up and answered on the first ring. I didn't say hello. I just listened. A sound that was half laugh, half scream exploded in my ear. "Are you insane?" Brad shouted. I could hear the wind in the background. He was probably on my balcony looking out at the ocean he thought he owned. "I assume you received the email," I said calmly. "I got your little joke, old man," Brad spat. 185 grand. You have lost your mind. The dementia is finally kicking in, isn't it? You think you can invoice me for staying at my father-in-law's house. "It is not a house, Brad," I said. "As you agreed in writing, it is a commercial venue. And you are a client who is very late on his bill." Brad laughed again. It was a manic, jagged sound. "I am not paying you a dime," he said. "Not a single penny. You are going to tear this up, and you are going to apologize to me for ruining my vibe. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are, Brad," I said. "You are a man with less than $2,000 in his checking account, $50,000 in gambling debt, and a very expensive taste in other people's property." The line went silent for a second. The mention of the gambling debt hit a nerve. I knew it would. "You have been snooping," he hissed. "That is illegal. It is due diligence," I corrected. "Listen to me, Douglas." Brad lowered his voice. It became a growl. "You are pushing me. You don't want to push me. I am the only thing keeping this family together. Sarah does what I say. She listens to me." I looked at Sarah. She had put the bowl down and was watching a seagull land on the railing. She looked serene. She looked like she had finally exhaled after holding her breath for 10 years. "Is that so?" I asked. "Yes, that is so," Brad said. "And if you don't back off, if you don't delete this invoice and send over another case of wine, I am going to make sure you never see your grandchildren again." I froze. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "You heard me," Brad continued, sensing he had struck a chord. "I control access. Sarah will do whatever I tell her. I will move us to the other side of the country. You will die alone in a nursing home, and your grandkids won't even know your name. I will tell them you were crazy. I will tell them you hated them." He was playing his ace, the nuclear option. He was weaponizing innocent children because he was too weak to fight a man. He thought Sarah was at the house cowering in a bedroom waiting for his permission to come out. He thought he still held the leash. He didn't know the leash had been cut. He didn't know the dog had bitten back. I looked at my daughter. She turned her head and caught my eye. She smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. "Who is that, Dad?" she asked softly. "It is nobody," I said to her. "Just a telemarketer selling a bad product." I put the phone back to my ear. Brad was still talking, listing the ways he would erase me from my family's history. "Are you done?" I asked. "I am done when I say I am done," he shouted. "Now cancel the invoice." "No," I said. "What? No," I repeated. And Brad. What I wouldn't bank on Sarah's cooperation if I were you. I hung up. I stared at the phone. He had threatened my relationship with my grandchildren. He had threatened my legacy. He had crossed the final line. There was no going back now. There was no mercy left in me. I opened my laptop again. I forwarded the invoice to Leonard. "Proceed to the next step," I typed. "File the lien and call the sheriff." I looked at Sarah. "Do you want another gelato?" I asked. She laughed. "I think I am full, Dad." "Good," I said, "because we have a show to catch." I stood up. The invoice was just the warning shot. The paper trail was established. The debt was formalized. Now I had the legal standing to treat him not as a guest, but as a squatter. Brad thought he was untouchable because he was family. He didn't realize that in the eyes of the law, he was just a liability on a balance sheet. And I was the auditor. I walked to the closet and pulled out a fresh shirt. It was time to go to work. The party was over. The eviction was about to begin. And unlike the air conditioning, there was no override code for what was coming next. The deadline on the invoice expired at exactly 9 in the morning on the 6th day. I did not receive a payment notification. I did not receive a wire transfer. I did not even receive a begging text message. Brad had chosen his path. He had chosen to call my bluff. He sat in my villa 5 miles away, likely nursing a hangover, and congratulating himself on staring down the old man. He thought that because I was family, there was a limit to how far I would go. He thought that because Sarah was his wife, I would never pull the trigger. He was operating under the laws of emotion. I was operating under the laws of contract. I sat in the conference room of the Islander Resort. I had rented it for the hour because this next step required witnesses and a notary. Leonard was there looking fresh in a linen suit, despite having been assaulted by my son-in-law just days prior. Next to him sat a notary public I had hired from a local agency. On the table lay a single document. It was a quitclaim deed. The law is a funny thing. It cares very deeply about who owns what on paper. Up until this moment, the deed to the Azure Horizon was in the name of Douglas Blackwood. That gave Brad a tiny sliver of a defense. If the police showed up, he could claim it was a domestic dispute. He could say, "This is my father-in-law's house, we are family. It is a civil matter." Police hate civil matters. They walk away from them. They tell you to take it to court. I did not want to take it to court. I wanted to take it to jail. So I was about to remove myself from the equation. I picked up the pen. "Are you ready to execute the transfer?" Leonard asked formally. "I am," I said. I signed my name. I was selling the property lock, stock, and barrel to a shell corporation called Blackwood Holdings, LLC. I was the sole proprietor of the LLC, of course, but in the eyes of the law, the house was no longer a personal residence. It was a corporate asset, and the sale price $1. I handed the dollar bill to Leonard, who was acting as the registered agent for the LLC. He pocketed it. The notary stamped the document. The transaction was complete. The deed was electronically filed with the county clerk moments later. Now the game had changed. Brad was no longer an unwelcome guest in his father-in-law's home. He was an unauthorized squatter occupying a commercial asset owned by a faceless investment firm. He wasn't having a family dispute. He was committing corporate espionage, trespassing, and felony destruction of property. Leonard looked at me. "The house is now a non-residential asset," he said. "The individuals inside have no lease, no permission to enter, and are actively destroying the valuation of the holding." "Make the call," I said. Leonard put his phone on the table on speaker. He dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department, but he didn't use a calm voice. He used the voice of a corporate attorney reporting a major crime in progress. "Dispatch, this is Leonard Katz, legal counsel for Blackwood Holdings. I am reporting an active break-in and occupation of a corporate property at 105 Ocean Drive. We have verified via remote security feed that there are approximately 15 individuals on site. They have bypassed electronic locks. They are destroying the interior. We estimate damages are currently exceeding $200,000. We are requesting immediate law enforcement intervention to secure the asset and remove the trespassers." The dispatcher's voice changed instantly. "When you say domestic disturbance, they send a patrol car in an hour. When you say corporate break-in with 6 figures in damages, they send the cavalry." "Are there weapons on the premises?" the dispatcher asked. "We have seen the individuals brandishing what appears to be a flare gun," Leonard said, referencing the item Brad had bragged about earlier. "And based on their erratic behavior, we suspect heavy narcotics use. We are concerned they may set fire to the structure." We have units rolling, the dispatcher said. Stay off the line. Leonard hung up. He looked at me. That is going to trigger a heavy response, Douglas, he said. They aren't going to knock politely. Good, I said. I don't want polite. I want effective. I opened my laptop to check the feeds. Brad was in the living room. He was holding court with his remaining friends. The group had thinned out slightly, but the core group of parasites remained. They looked terrible. The house was hot, smelly, and trashed, but Brad was still posturing. I listened to the audio. The old man is bluffing, Brad was saying, gesturing with a half-empty bottle of vodka. He sent me some fake invoice. Can you believe that he thinks I am going to pay him to stay in my own wife's house? He is probably crying in some motel right now, waiting for me to apologize. One of his friends laughed nervously. But Brad, what if he calls the cops? Let him call the cops, Brad shouted. I will tell them he invited us. I have texts from Sarah. It is, he said, she said. They can't kick us out. We have rights, squatters' rights or whatever. I looked it up. I shook my head. He had looked up squatters' rights on Google and thought he was a legal scholar. He didn't understand that those rights apply to people who have lived somewhere for years, not for a week-long bender in a house that just changed ownership 5 minutes ago. I watched him take a swig of vodka. He spilled some on his shirt. He didn't care. He looked like a captain going down with a ship made of garbage. I switched the camera view to the driveway. It started silently. The first sheriff's cruiser turned onto the long driveway, no sirens, just lights flashing in the bright Florida sun. Then a second one. Then a third. Then a black SUV marked K9 unit. They weren't coming to talk. They were pulling up in a tactical formation. They blocked the exit. Officers spilled out, hands resting on their holsters. They looked serious. They looked like men who were tired of dealing with entitled tourists, destroying their town. I saw Brad's friend, the one with the slicked-back hair, walk past the front window. He saw the lights. He dropped his drink. Cops, he screamed. Cops. The room on the screen exploded into chaos. People started running. Some ran toward the back door, heading for the beach. Others ran upstairs to hide in the bedrooms. Brad stood frozen in the middle of the room. He looked at the window. He looked at the door. He didn't run. He couldn't run. His ego weighed too much. He marched to the front door and threw it open. I zoomed in on the driveway camera. Brad stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, wearing dirty shorts and a stained t-shirt. He held his hands up, not in surrender, but in exasperation. "What is the meaning of this?" he screamed at the deputies. "Do you know who I am? This is private property." A deputy with stripes on his sleeve stepped forward. He didn't smile. He didn't ask nicely. "Get on the ground," the deputy shouted. "Get on the ground now." Brad blinked. He looked confused. He looked like someone who had never been told what to do by a man with a gun. "No," Brad yelled back. "I live here. My father-in-law owns this. Call Douglas Blackwood. He will tell you." The deputy didn't call anyone. He signaled to his partner. "Sir, this property is owned by Blackwood Holdings," the deputy barked. "We have a signed complaint from the owner regarding criminal trespass and felony vandalism. You are not a tenant. You are an intruder. Now get on the ground, or we will put you on the ground." Brad stalled. His brain couldn't process the shift. He couldn't process that Douglas Blackwood, the person, and Blackwood Holdings, the corporation, were two different legal entities, and that one of them had just declared war. "This is a mistake," Brad shrieked. "Sarah? Where is Sarah?" Two deputies moved in. They didn't tackle him, but they grabbed his arms and spun him around. They slammed him against the hood of the nearest patrol car. The sound of metal hitting flesh echoed through my laptop speakers. "Ow, you are hurting me! I am suing you! I am suing everybody!" Brad screamed. The click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had heard in years. I watched as they marched him into the back of the cruiser. He was kicking and screaming like a toddler. He looked ridiculous. He looked small. Inside the house, the deputies were rounding up the rest of the guests. They were dragging them out of closets and from under beds. They were lining them up on the curb. I saw the K9 unit go inside. I turned to Leonard. "It is done," I said. Leonard nodded. He was already typing on his phone. "The holding company will press charges for everything," he said. "Every broken glass. Every stain. We are not letting them plead this down to a misdemeanor. This is felony territory now." I looked back at the screen. Brad was in the back of the car, his face pressed against the glass. He was looking at the house. He looked terrified. He realized finally that there was no safety net. Sarah wasn't there to smooth it over. I wasn't there to write a check. He was alone with the consequences of his own arrogance. And I felt a profound sense of calm. I had just swatted my own house. I had just arrested my son-in-law. I picked up my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to the police, not to Sarah. I called the impound lot. "I have 4 SUVs on my property that need to be towed," I said, "and the drivers are indisposed. Come pick them up." I hung up. The party was officially over. Now the cleanup began. And for Brad, the cleanup was going to be a life sentence of debt and regret. The feed on my laptop screen flickered with the strobe effect of red and blue emergency lights. From my hotel suite 5 miles away, it looked like a silent disco of consequences. But I knew it wasn't silent. I turned up the volume on the secure feed to hear every word. 3 sheriff cruisers and 2 unmarked black SUVs from the private security firm Leonard had contracted screeched to a halt on the gravel. They didn't park politely. They parked tactically, boxing in the rented luxury cars, cutting off any escape route. The doors flew open in unison. Uniformed deputies and private contractors in tactical vests spilled out, moving with the precision of a team clearing a hostile zone. Inside the villa, the bass from the speakers was still shaking the walls. Brad was standing on the coffee table, shirtless, holding a bottle of vodka like a trophy, oblivious to the fact that his kingdom had just been invaded. Then the front door was breached. It wasn't kicked in. The private security team had the digital master key I had provided. The door swung open, and the humid night air was instantly filled with the sharp, authoritative commands of law enforcement. "Sheriff's Department. Cut the music. Everyone stay where you are." The music died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of glass shattering as someone dropped a drink in shock. Brad froze on the table. He looked at the door. He blinked, trying to process the intrusion through a haze of alcohol and arrogance. He didn't step down. He didn't put his hands up. He puffed out his chest. "Who the hell are you?" Brad screamed. He jumped down from the table, stumbling slightly. "Get out of my house. You can't be in here. This is private property." A tall deputy with silver hair and a face carved from granite stepped forward. He didn't look impressed. He looked bored. He held a thick stack of paperwork in his hand. "We know it is private property, sir," the deputy said, his voice calm and booming. "That is exactly why we are here. Are you Bradley Thompson?" Brad marched right up to the deputy, invading his space. He poked a finger at the badge on the deputy's chest. "Yeah, I am Brad Thompson, and I am the son-in-law of the owner, Douglas Blackwood. Call him. He will tell you to get lost. This is a family home. You are trespassing." I leaned closer to my screen. This was the moment. This was the turn. The deputy didn't flinch. He didn't reach for his radio to call me. He just held up the first document in his stack. It was a property deed, freshly stamped with the county seal. "Sir, according to the county clerk's office as of 4 hours ago, this property is not owned by Douglas Blackwood. It is owned by Blackwood Holdings LLC, a corporate entity." Brad stopped. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked like a fish on a dock. What he stammered. That is a shell company. It is the same thing." Douglas owns it. It is my family's house. The deputy shook his head. He flipped to the next page. This is a commercial asset, sir, and according to the complaint filed by the legal representative of Blackwood Holdings, you are not a family guest. You are a commercial tenant in default. Tenant Brad laughed a high-pitched, nervous sound. I am not a tenant. I didn't sign a lease. The deputy pulled out a copy of the document Brad had scribbled his name on at the front door 5 days ago. The document he thought was a liability waiver. The deputy held it up, pointing to the signature at the bottom. Is this your signature, Mr. Thompson? Brad squinted at it. Yeah, so what? That is just the insurance thing for the pool. The deputy flipped the document over to the terms and conditions on the back. This is a short-term commercial lease agreement, the deputy read aloud. It stipulates a daily rate of $15,000 payable in advance. It also includes a strict eviction clause for non-payment or violation of property codes. Brad stared at the paper. The color drained from his face. The alcohol was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard realization that he had signed his own death warrant. I didn't read that, Brad whispered. Ignorance of a contract is not a defense, sir, the deputy said. According to this, your lease expired 2 hours ago when you failed to remit payment for the invoice sent to you. You are currently in violation of a commercial contract. You are trespassing on corporate property. And based on the condition of this room, you are also committing felony destruction of assets. Brad looked around the room. He looked at the stained rugs. He looked at the cigarette burns on the sofa. He looked at his friends who were currently shrinking back against the walls, trying to become invisible. But, Brad stuttered, but Douglas wouldn't do this. He is my father-in-law. The deputy lowered the papers. He looked Brad in the eye. Mr. Thompson, the holding company, has pressed charges. They have requested immediate removal of all unauthorized persons. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before we begin making arrests for criminal trespass. Brad looked wild. He looked at the deputy, then at his friends. You can't do this, he screamed. We have rights, squatters' rights. That was the wrong thing to say. The deputy signaled to his team. Sir, this is not a residence. This is a business. Squatters' rights do not apply to commercial break-ins. You are now disturbing the peace and refusing a lawful order to vacate. Brad lunged. It wasn't an attack, really. It was a desperate grab for the papers in the deputy's hand, as if tearing them up would make the nightmare go away. That was all the excuse they needed. 2 officers moved in. They grabbed Brad's arms. He flailed, knocking over a lamp. Get off me, he shrieked. I am suing you. I am suing everybody. They spun him around and slammed him against the wall. The sound was a dull thud that vibrated through the microphone. I watched as the handcuffs came out. The click of the metal ratchets was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. Bradley Thompson. You are under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and disorderly conduct, the deputy recited. Brad was crying now, snot and tears running down his face. Sarah, he wailed. Sarah, help me, call your dad. I watched from my hotel room. Sarah was sitting on the sofa behind me reading a magazine. She hadn't heard a thing. She didn't want to hear a thing. The deputy hauled Brad toward the door. Brad dragged his feet, kicking at the floor tiles, leaving scuff marks that I would absolutely be adding to the bill. Wait, Brad yelled at his friends. Don't just stand there. Tell them I invited you. The room was silent. His 15 best friends, the people he had spent my money to impress, the people he had tried to launch a hedge fund with, looked at him with total detachment. One of them, the guy with the slicked-back hair who had burned my sofa, stepped forward. He held up his hands in surrender. Officer, he said smoothly, we didn't know. He told us this was his place. He charged us $2,000 each for the week. We are victims of fraud here. Brad's head snapped up. You traitor, Brad screamed. You liar! The deputy paused. He looked at the friend. He charged you admission, the deputy asked. Yeah, the friend said, pulling out his phone. I have the Venmo receipt right here. $2,000 for all-inclusive villa access. I smiled. That was the nail in the coffin. That wasn't just trespassing. That was fraud. That was running an unlicensed hotel. That was tax evasion. The deputy nodded. Add fraud to the list, he told his partner. They dragged Brad out the door. He was screaming incoherently now, a mix of threats and pleas. The flashing lights outside washed over him as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. Inside the house, the security team began moving the rest of the guests out. They were compliant. They were terrified. They grabbed their bags and ran for their cars, leaving behind the mess, the drugs, and their loyalty to Brad. I watched the room empty out. It was silent again. Just the hum of the air conditioning I had remotely reactivated and the flashing lights reflecting off the ruined furniture. I picked up my phone and called Leonard. Did you hear that? I asked. I heard it, Leonard said. His voice was bright. Charging admission. That is a felony. We have him on solicitations of funds under false pretenses. It is done, I said. Not yet, Leonard said. The police are taking him to the station. Do you want to leave him there overnight? I looked at the screen. The cruiser was pulling away. Brad's face pressed against the glass, a mask of terror. No, I said. I want him to sit there for an hour. Let the reality sink in. Let him realize that no one is coming. And then what? Leonard asked. Then I will go down there, I said. I have one last document to deliver. I hung up. I stood up and walked over to Sarah. She looked up from her magazine. Is it over? She asked softly. The party is over, I said. But the cleanup is just beginning. Get dressed, Sarah. We have to go to the police station. Why? She asked, her eyes widening. Because I said, picking up a folder from the desk. We need to bail your husband out. She looked confused. You are going to help him, I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who has cornered a rabbit. No, I said. I am not going to help him. I am going to end him. Bail is just the price of admission for the final act. I watched the screen as the deputy lined the 15 guests up against the wall of my living room. They looked like a lineup of sad, wet peacocks. The music was gone. The bravado was gone. In its place was the cold, sober reality of law enforcement. The K9 unit, a German shepherd that looked like it meant business, was moving through the room. It sniffed the ruined sofa. It sniffed the pile of designer bags in the corner. Then it stopped at the kitchen island, right next to where Brad had been holding court. The dog sat down and barked once. The handler signaled to the other deputies. They opened the cooler Brad had dragged in. Inside, nestled between bags of melting ice, were not just bottles of beer. There were plastic baggies. There were unlabeled bottles of liquor that looked like they had been brewed in a bathtub. Possession of controlled substances and distribution of illicit alcohol, the deputy announced. His voice was flat, echoing off the high ceilings. The room erupted in a panic that was almost funny to watch. These were people who thought consequences were things that happened to poor people. They started shouting over each other. That is not mine, one girl yelled. I didn't bring that, the guy with the slicked back hair shouted. The deputy held up a hand. Silence, everyone is detained. We are checking IDs and we are searching everyone. If this belongs to the house, the tenant is responsible. If it belongs to you, you are responsible. Brad was standing by the door, handcuffed, watching his empire crumble. He looked at his friends. He looked at the people he had brought here to impress the people he had sworn to protect with his status. Tell them, Brad pleaded. Tell them we just found it here. Tell them it was here when we arrived. He was trying to frame me. He was trying to plant drugs in my house to save his own skin. It was a move so desperate and so vile that I felt a fresh wave of cold anger wash over me. But he had miscalculated. He had miscalculated the loyalty of vultures. Vultures do not protect the carcass. They pick it clean and fly away. The guy with the ponytail, the one who had burned my sofa, stepped forward. He looked at Brad. He looked at the cop. He looked at the potential felony charge hanging over his head. "Officer," he said, his voice trembling but clear, "that cooler belongs to Brad. He brought it. He told us it was part of the package." Brad's eyes bulged. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "Shut up, Mike." Mike didn't shut up. Mike pulled out his phone. "He sent us a menu in the group chat," Mike said, unlocking his screen and holding it out to the deputy. "Look, he promised premium party favors included with the entry fee." "Entry fee?" the deputy asked, his eyebrows raising. "Yeah," Mike said. "We all paid $2,000 a head." He said this was his private resort. He said he had the permits. He said everything was legal. The dam broke. Once one of them turned, they all turned. It was a stampede of betrayal. "I have the receipt right here," a girl shouted, waving her phone. $2,000 for the week." "He told me this was a corporate retreat," another guy yelled. "I want my money back." "He sold us tickets." I watched Brad's face. It was a masterpiece of devastation. He wasn't just being arrested. He was being dismantled. His friends weren't friends. They were customers. And they were dissatisfied customers who were realizing they had been scammed. The deputy looked at Brad. He looked at the phone Mike was holding. He scrolled through the chat. So the deputy said, turning to Brad, "You are not just trespassing. You are running an unlicensed commercial venue. You are distributing controlled substances. And you are defrauding these people by selling access to property you do not own." "It is a donation," Brad stammered. "They donated to my fund. It wasn't a fee." The deputy shook his head. He walked over to Brad. "Bradley Thompson, you are already under arrest for trespassing," the deputy said. "We are adding distribution fraud and operating an illegal enterprise to the list." They marched him out. This time he didn't scream. He didn't fight. He hung his head. He looked broken. He walked past the line of his former friends, and not a single one of them looked him in the eye. They were too busy writing statements for the police, ensuring that every drop of blame landed squarely on Brad's shoulders. I watched the deputies bag the evidence. I watched them take photos of the Venmo receipts on the guests' phones. It was perfect. If I had sued him, it would have been a civil battle. He could have dragged it out for years. But this was criminal. This was the state versus Bradley Thompson. And the state had 15 witnesses who were willing to sing like canaries to avoid a drug charge. I picked up my phone and called Leonard. "The guests turned," I said. "They admitted to paying an entry fee. They gave up the group chat." Leonard laughed. "That is the ball game, Douglas. That is tax fraud. That is wire fraud. He is going to be buried under so many statutes he won't see the sun for a decade." "Is Sarah ready?" I asked. "She is in the car," Leonard said. "We are meeting you at the station." I closed my laptop. The show was over. The house was secure. The police were doing the cleanup now. I stood up and smoothed my shirt. I felt lighter. The weight of the last 5 years, the weight of watching this man drain my daughter's spirit and my bank account, was gone. I walked to the door of my hotel suite. I didn't look back at the screen. I didn't need to. I knew what I would see. An empty house, a ruined rug, and a silence that was worth every penny of the damages. I went down to the lobby. My truck was waiting. I drove to the police station, not with anger, but with purpose. Brad thought the worst part was over. He thought the handcuffs were the bottom. He was wrong. The bottom was waiting for him in the interrogation room, and her name was Sarah. The fluorescent lights of the police station holding area hummed with a sound that usually gave people a headache. but to me it sounded like the steady frequency of justice. I stood at the desk and counted out $5,000 in cash. It was the 10% premium on a $50,000 bond. I was not paying it because I wanted Brad free. I was paying it because you cannot serve civil lawsuit papers to a man locked in a holding cell without a bureaucratic nightmare. I needed him on the sidewalk. I needed him exposed. The desk sergeant processed the paperwork without looking up. He slid a clipboard across the counter. I signed. It was the last check I would ever write for my son-in-law. 10 minutes later, a buzzer sounded, and a heavy steel door clicked open. Brad stepped out. He looked like a man who had been put through a trash compactor. His designer shirt was torn at the shoulder. He was shoeless. He smelled of sweat and the terrifying realization that he was not special. He saw me standing there, and his face crumpled. He ran toward me, his hands shaking, reaching out as if he expected a hug. I stepped back. He stopped, his arms falling to his sides. "Douglas," he choked out. "Thank God. I knew you would come. I knew you wouldn't leave family in here. These cops are insane. They treated me like a criminal." "You are a criminal, Brad," I said. I read the charges. He started crying. It was a wet, ugly sound. It wasn't the crying of a man who is sorry. It was the crying of a man who got caught. It was just a party, he sobbed. I was under so much pressure. The market is down. The investors were pushing me. I just needed to show them I was successful so they would buy in. I did it for Sarah. I did it for us. "Stop," I said. He froze. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "I am not here to listen to your excuses," I said. "I am here to deliver a message." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. I held it out. He took it with trembling fingers. "What is this?" he asked. "Is this for the lawyer? Are you getting me a lawyer? Open it," I said. He tore the flap open. He pulled out the first document. It was thick, stapled at the top. At the center of the page, in bold letters, it read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "Sarah," he whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic. "She can't do this. She loves me. I can explain everything to her." "She is gone, Brad," I said. "She is in a safe place where your voice cannot reach her. She has filed for emergency protection and full asset separation. You are not a husband anymore. You are a respondent." He shook his head, denial washing over him. Then he looked at the second document in the envelope. It was even thicker. "Civil lawsuit," he stammered. $250,000, Douglas. I don't have this kind of money. You know I don't. Why are you doing this? I leaned in close. This was the moment I had prepared for. "I know you don't have the money, Brad," I said softly, "but I know who does. Do you remember the condo in Boca Raton? The one your parents live in, the one you co-signed on 5 years ago to help them refinance because your credit was artificially high from all the debts I paid off." Brad went pale. He stopped breathing. "You wouldn't," he gasped. "That is my parents' home. You guaranteed the loan," I said. "You put your name on the deed as collateral. I bought that note from the bank this morning through my holding company. I own their mortgage now." I pointed at the papers in his hand. "You have 30 days to pay me $250,000 for the damages to my villa," I said. "If you do not pay, I will trigger the default clause on your assets. I will foreclose on that condo. I will put your parents on the street to pay for your party." He looked at me with pure horror. He finally saw me, not as the old man, not as the pushover, but as the wall he had run into at 100 miles an hour. "You are a monster," he whispered. I turned my back on him. "I am just a landlord collecting rent," I said. "You have 30 days. Tick-tock." The fall of Bradley Thompson was not a slow decline. It was a cliff dive without a parachute. 48 hours after I left him standing on the sidewalk outside the police station, his life as he knew it had ceased to exist. The brokerage firm he worked for did not wait for a conviction. In the financial world, the mere accusation of fraud involving client funds or running an illegal enterprise is a death sentence. When the police report hit the compliance officer's desk, Brad's license was suspended immediately. He was fired via a courier who delivered a box of his personal effects to his parents' front door. He was a stockbroker who was legally barred from trading stocks. He was a shark who had been defanged and thrown back into the kiddie pool. Then came the lawsuits from his so-called inner circle. The 15 people he had tried to impress didn't just give statements to the police. They wanted their money back. They filed individual small claim suits for the $2,000 entry fees, plus damages for emotional distress. They weren't suing him because they needed the cash. They were suing him to distance themselves from his failure. They were proving to the world that they were victims, not accomplices. He was being pecked to death by the very peacocks he had tried to preen for. His social media was flooded with comments calling him a scammer. His reputation was not just tarnished, it was incinerated. Sarah stayed strong. She remained at the hotel meeting with the divorce lawyers I had retained. She blocked his number. She blocked his email. She refused to be the shoulder he cried on. For the first time in her life, she saw him clearly. She saw a man who would drown her to keep his head above water. She became a ghost to him. He screamed into the void, begging for her to come back to tell the police it was all a misunderstanding, but the void had stopped listening. But the final blow, the one that truly sealed his coffin, was the maneuver he never saw coming. I sat in my office with Leonard and looked at a spreadsheet of Brad's liabilities. He was toxic. Banks get nervous when their debtors get arrested for fraud and lose their primary source of income. They look to sell off high-risk debt for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. They want to cut their losses. I was happy to help them. I used a separate shell company called Retribution Ventures. I bought it all. I bought the note on his personal loan. I bought the debt from his maxed-out credit cards. I bought the outstanding balance on his leased luxury car. I consolidated every single cent he owed to every institution that was threatening him. I wasn't just his angry father-in-law anymore. I wasn't just the landlord suing him for property damage. I was his primary creditor. I owned his debt. I owned the interest rates. I owned the right to freeze his remaining sound assets and garnish any future wages he might scrape together until he was 90 years old. I held the paper on his life. He was walking around, thinking he just needed to find a new job to get back on his feet. He didn't realize that even if he found a job, every paycheck already belonged to me. I had turned him into an indentured servant to his own stupidity. He was technically a free man while out on bail, but financially he was my property. It took 3 weeks to scrub the stain of Bradley Thompson from the azure horizon. I hired a specialized restoration crew who worked 12-hour shifts. They replaced the Persian rug with an even rarer silk weave. They reupholstered the Italian sofa with leather flown in from Milan. They sanded the cigar burns out of the kitchen island and repainted the walls where wine had been splashed. Now the villa was silent again, the way it was meant to be. The echo of cheap techno music and entitled laughter was gone, replaced by the rhythmic sound of the waves hitting the shore. I sat on the balcony. It was 6 a.m. The sun was breaking over the Atlantic, painting the water in shades of gold and violet that no amount of money could buy. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, not stale beer and desperation. The sliding glass door opened softly. Sarah walked out. She held a steaming mug of tea. She wasn't wearing makeup. She wasn't wearing the tight, uncomfortable clothes Brad liked her in. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and shorts. She looked younger. She looked like my daughter again, not someone's trophy wife or a prop for a Ponzi scheme. She sat down next to me and didn't say a word. She just watched the sunrise. Then she smiled. It wasn't a polite smile for a camera. It wasn't a nervous smile to placate a volatile husband. It was a real smile. It was the smile of a woman who woke up without a knot in her stomach for the first time in a decade. I looked at her and did the math one last time. The repairs and restoration cost exactly $250,000. The legal fees were another $50,000. I had spent a small fortune buying Brad's toxic debt. On paper, it was a massive loss. A forensic accountant would look at this ledger and see bleeding red ink. But I looked at Sarah breathing easy, her shoulders relaxed, the light returning to her eyes, and I knew the truth. It was the best investment I had ever made. I had lost a son-in-law who treated people like commodities. But I had gained back the daughter I thought I had lost to his manipulation. $250,000 to get my family back. It was a bargain. It was worth every single cent. I reached for the bottle of Macallan 25. The real bottle. The one I had hidden in the safe room before the invasion. I poured a splash into my glass. The amber liquid caught the morning light. My phone buzzed on the teak table. The vibration cut through the peace. I looked at the screen. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, likely a burner phone or a friend's device, but I knew the voice behind the text immediately. Douglas, please. I have nowhere to go. My parents kicked me out. Just $500 for food. I will sign anything. Just talk to me. It was Brad. He was still trying. He still thought there was a negotiation to be had. He still thought he was a player in the game. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt absolutely nothing. He was just a bad line of code that had been successfully deleted from the program. He was a rounding error that had been corrected. I tapped the screen once. Block number. I took a sip of the whiskey. It was smooth. It tasted like victory. I looked out at the endless blue horizon. The water was calm. The house was clean. My daughter was safe. Life was good. Did you like the story? Let me know which city you are listening from in the comments below. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, support the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I look forward to reading your comments. See you in the next story.